Former U.S. President Donald Trump argues his case to the judge in his civil fraud trial. Plus, the latest on the race for the White House. Hello, I'm Arlen Naidu, and this is The Heat. Donald Trump declared his innocence and accused the judge of having his own agenda during closing arguments in the civil fraud trial. We'll have more on that later in the program. But first, with just 5 days to go before the first contest for the Republican presidential nomination, former President Donald Trump continues to shuttle between his campaign and the courtroom. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former UN Ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley clashed on a range of issues in Iowa on Wednesday night. Dan Williams has more in this report.
One final national TV debate before the first votes are cast in the 2024 presidential election in the Iowa caucuses. Republican candidates Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley went head-to-head in a Republican presidential debate. Both are far behind the front-runner, the former U.S. President Donald Trump, in the polls, and both came out swinging.
We don't need another mealy-mouthed politician who just tells you what she thinks you want to hear just to try to get your vote, then to get in office and to do her donors' bidding.
He has switched his policies multiple times, and we'll call that out tonight. But every time he lies, Drake University, don't turn this into a drinking game because you will be overserved by the end of the night.
While your tax dollars are going to pay the pensions of Ukrainian bureaucrats.
That's not true.
You talk about putting Americans last. That is wrong. You've supported all that money going over there. So let's put our own people first. We have to put Governor.
Although most of the attacks focused on each other, both were more vocal in their criticism of Trump than in previous debates, including his role in the 2021 Capitol riots.
I think what happened on January 6th was a terrible day, and I think President Trump will have to answer for it.
While DeSantis said the Republican Party would need to nominate someone other than Trump because of his various legal challenges.
I don't think he gets through that. And so what are we going to do as Republicans in terms of who we nominate for president?
Here we go.
Across Des Moines at the same time, Trump enjoyed a more friendly, televised town hall meeting. And Trump was quick to pick up on comments made by Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, who announced the end of his own presidential campaign just hours earlier, that Haley would get smoked by Trump in the election race.
He had a hot mic where he was talking to somebody about the weather, and he happened to say that she doesn't have what it takes. She'll be creamed in the election. And I mean, I know her very well, and I happen to believe that Chris Christie is right.
But Trump also attacked DeSantis.
You like Ron DeSantis, but he wouldn't even be around today. He'd be working in a pizza shop or perhaps a law firm if I didn't endorse him.
This was a heated debate between two candidates keen to offer an alternative vision for the Republican Party. But Trump remains the clear front-runner for the Republican nomination. Whether this debate changed the minds of voters, at least in Iowa, will come clear as Iowa hosts its caucuses next Monday. Dan Williams, CGTN, Des Moines, Iowa.
There is much to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Rafael Bernal is a staff writer and the co-host of What America's Thinking on Hill Television. Brandon Brice is a conservative columnist and radio talk show host. Also with us is Jeff Swartz. He served as a prosecutor, defense attorney, and judge. He's currently a professor at Cooley Law School. And Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Adolfo, well, we just saw the Republican candidates for president, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. They were on the debate stage on Wednesday night. Both are battling to cut into the considerable lead that former President Donald Trump has. But as we saw, they spent a lot of time attacking each other. What did we learn, and who likely came out ahead?
Well, you can see it's getting to be pretty much the witching hour here, and you can see the desperation in both candidates, quite frankly. I actually thought that in terms of the debate last night, between the two of them, I think Governor DeSantis actually won it, and I'm surprised because he has more at stake in Iowa than Nikki Haley. He has to do well in Iowa, very well, a second place finish. that's definitively second place, not even close. If he doesn't, he's at a huge disadvantage in New Hampshire, where she's much stronger. So I was surprised that she seemed, in my view, to somehow DeSantis has gotten under her skin, and I think he came off far more presidential. But the real winner, of course, was President Trump at the alternative town hall at Drake University. His numbers have only climbed in Iowa. He is the formidable leader and continues to be the odds-on favorite to win, well, the nomination, but certainly the Iowa caucuses next week. I would be very, very surprised if it's the second place person is not a very distant second place. But I think you mentioned the report here, the attacks on President Trump. Yes, they have stepped up, but you're now at the point, and we'll get to Christie here in a moment, I'm sure. You're at the point here where you have nothing to lose if you're in this presidential race for seriously. You need to make inroads one way or the other, even risking alienating the majority of Republicans who support President Trump, and that's what they're doing, with a hope to put some type of coalition together if there's only one remaining alternative to President Trump. But that's going to be a very tall order.
Rafael, great to have you with us in the studio. What did you make of the debate last night?
Well, it was a race for second place, and as such, it lacked the seriousness of a debate where you could have a winner, or even the seriousness of a primary where a second place contender is really trying to change the dynamics of the race. The example there is Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton in 2016. Okay. Certainly, Sanders was not kind to Clinton, but this degree of personal attacks, you just didn't see that in the primary. So this debate really shows the weaknesses of the two candidates, and Adolfo's right. The winner is former President Trump, hands down. He is proving to be the leader and the owner almost of the Republican Party, day in and day out. And I would even go further than Adolfo and say it would be a big surprise if he doesn't win the nomination. He's not the hands down favorite in Iowa and New Hampshire. He's hands down favorite maybe in every state.
And what did you make of Adolfo's point that DeSantis looked more presidential?
But possibly, but in this race for second place, I think that sticks to, the second place thing sticks to a lot of people. There are DeSantis followers who are basically saying they don't think Trump can get Trumpist ideas done. Everything that Trump didn't get to the finish line, whether it's the wall, whether the series of policies that they believe DeSantis is better suited to get to that finish line. But there's fewer and fewer of them. There's more people following Nikki Haley, for that matter.
Brandon, Trump is expected to see a big win in Iowa. That'll be next Monday. He's polling around 50%. However, there was one analyst from Drake University, a professor there, Professor Dennis Goldford, and he says, it's a crisis of expectations, isn't it? If Trump doesn't get 50%, let's say he gets 40%, I mean, does he look then to be weakened? Will there be a certain element of uncertainty then?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, again, going back to this is a race. Last night, what you saw was a race for second place for VP. I think he clearly has the nomination. I would be shocked if he didn't. I was very actually shocked that Nikki Haley did not perform as well as I would have expected her to. I know she's been pretty top-notch the last couple of weeks, but last night I didn't feel it, and I actually thought DeSantis finally shown that he could be presidential in last night's event.
Jeff, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. The thing is that Trump is right now in the midst of a trial. In fact, our television screens were full of that today. He's facing multiple charges and there'll be many trials over the next few months. But he still maintains a significant lead. We'll get to the trial, today's trial, a little later. But how does one explain the support for him when he's facing so many charges?
Well, he has become the master of playing the victim, and every time there is a hearing, he shows up. Even if he doesn't get to speak in court, he walks outside the courthouse and alleges that, in fact, everything is just a big conspiracy against him. It has been very successful for him in fundraising. For example, the date that he was arraigned in federal court, he made $1 million in contributions. So this is the reason. The people that follow Trump will continue to follow Trump. I think the Democrats know that. And I think that Democrats, generally speaking, are not looking to pick off Republicans. They just want to hold on to the independents and get enough of a turnout from their people, which would have to be large, to be able to repeat what happened in 2020. So I'm not surprised by this. Everything he's done from 2016 on, every time he has a problem, his fundraising goes up because he claims it's a witch hunt and everybody's against him and he needs money to pay for his attorney's fees.
Well, the Russia hoax was a witch hunt. And so the president is absolutely right. So there have been these witch hunts, and this latest persecutions, and that's what they are. They're not prosecutions, they're persecutions. Of course his support is growing. Yeah. But the suggestion here, or the insinuation that this is just Trump supporters, it's just wrong, because if you look at all the national polling on this, including independents and Democrats even, either there's weak Democrat support or independents breaking for Trump. You can't be ahead in a poll in a state like Michigan by 8 to 10 points, which he is, with just MAGA supporters. You're appealing to a lot of people here. So President Trump is appealing right now. All the polls show it to the majority of the American people, certainly at a national level. I'm talking beyond Republicans. I'm talking head-to-head with Joe Biden. So there aren't enough Republicans in the country to put him at the numbers he is nationally. I will say one quick thing to my good friend about the VP. None of these people, and Jeffrey probably agree with this because you know Donald Trump's temperament, none of these candidates running against President Trump for the nomination will be in the Trump administration, nor will they be his nominee for vice president.
Right. I would agree with you, Rodolfo. The second place is not, to me, second place is not about becoming vice president. It's about becoming 4 years from now the person who heads the race for the 28 nomination. That's correct. What this is all about. And for example, DeSantis is going to come back to Florida very shortly, and he's going to propose a bill for a constitutional amendment to change the limitations of times he can serve from 2 to 3. And it will pass. In a 24 election, it will pass, and he will get a third term.
A rare day we're in agreement, Jeffrey. Yes.
It's nice to be that way.
All right, let's get back to the race right now. Rafael, new polls show that Nikki Haley is within striking distance in New Hampshire. Trump's lead is now actually in single digits. It's 39 to 32. Christie came in at 12 points. Look, that is a very distant third. But 2/3 of Christie's supporters said Haley would be their second choice. So with Chris Christie now announcing that he's suspended his presidential campaign, does she gain a lot from that?
I mean, he might have to eat his words about her getting smoked. But if the numbers translate 1-to-1, which they rarely do in polling, Haley has a better chance in New Hampshire. But really, New Hampshire, we have to remember, is always a state that kind of zigs when everybody else is zagging. So it makes more sense to me that independent streak in New Hampshire, more people supporting, more Republicans being anti-Trump, and more independents leaning Republican, but still being anti-Trump.
I mean, overall, what would his departure, what kind of impact would it have on the race?
Chris Christie's?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it helps Nikki Haley, for sure, because Nikki Haley is the closest thing to an anti-Trump candidate remaining. But he was polling in the double digits. So he made it much farther than anyone thought he would make it with the message. He was asking a Trumpist party to be anti-Trumpist. It's a very difficult message to get there. But I think even he's surprised he got this far. So him leaving now won't have that much of an effect. It's just that he lasted this long. That's surprising.
Brandon, if we talk about one of the issues that's likely to be a big issue in the election, that's the issue of abortion. Here is former President Trump talking about the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Let's listen.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it. They wanted to get it back, right? You wouldn't have that. There would be no question. Nobody else was going to get that done but me.
Yeah.
So, Brendan, here we have the former president taking credit for what is or was a very unpopular decision. I mean, how is this likely to play among female voters and others as well, especially in critical swing states?
Well, I think the fact that you have a female running for president, I think this definitely is a feather in her cap. But also, let's look at, it's really going to come down to the number of independent voters who are for, or maybe not for the abortion issue. And as you remember, that was a big issue that actually negatively impacted Republicans statewide in the recent election, and national, and then also in the national polls. And so I think it's interesting to see how this is going to have a negative impact on Republicans. And the fact that the president supported that, I don't think that was a good thing if you are a person, like a candidate like DeSantis, versus if you are a candidate like Nikki Haley, who is a female, who can talk on and has talked about these issues in the past.
Adolfo, what are your thoughts on that issue, the abortion issue?
Well, I think the abortion issue is going to be a transition. I think Nikki Haley's on the right path in terms of what the numbers are. It doesn't matter that the majority of Republicans feel the way they do. The majority of Americans don't. So you're going to have a shift, and President Trump's going to start doing it very quickly. He's looking to the general to move to a position that is much more akin to Governor Haley's position. Yes, it is a struggle within the Republican Party, but the numbers are very clear, and the results recently in states that Kansas, Ohio, and where there's just been resounding defeats for the pro-life movement, in my opinion, in the first instance. Secondly, I will say that just quickly on New Hampshire, so I know we'll be talking about New Hampshire a lot in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. One has to keep in mind that New Hampshire, Democrats participate in the primary as well, and independents. It isn't Iowa. So that is the New Hampshire, you're right, when Rafael said zigzags. You remember it was Governor Kasich. Remember who he was? The governor of Ohio who won the New Hampshire primary in 2016. Yep. Nobody even knows who he is today. And I worked on the McCain campaign in 2000. We won New Hampshire by double digits, huge. John McCain did not become our nominee. So I have to keep that in mind. But abortion, the Republican Party is going to have to evolve.
Okay, now as we said at the top of the show, Donald Trump made his case before the judge in his New York civil fraud trial. Well, joining us now from outside the courthouse is Sally Patterson. So Sally, this was a bit of a surprise. Judge Engoron said the former president would not be allowed to speak unless he agreed to certain conditions. Remind us what's at stake here for the Trump organization and what took place in court today.
Certainly a surprise for all of us closely watching this case. There was much back and forth about whether Donald Trump would be allowed to speak. He'd requested to do so. And he was basically told, yes, you can speak, even though it's a slightly unusual move, but you have to stick to very strict parameters in order to do so. And that includes only sticking to the facts, only sticking to the evidence that's already been presented in this case, and not attacking the judge or his team. Also, he was told not to use this as a time to make a campaign speech, a political speech. That's what Judge Arthur Engoron said, and Donald Trump didn't exactly stick to that brief. Instead, he said that he was innocent. He said that this was politically motivated, and he said that actually he was the one who was the victim of fraud, and he was the one who should be receiving damages. This all stems back to a lawsuit put forward by the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, who accuses Donald Trump and his co-defendants of basically drumming up his wealth in order to get beneficial loans from banks and insurance companies. And what they have said is that they've denied any wrongdoing. I'm standing here outside the court, and as you can hear, it's busy here in the center of Manhattan, and lots of the world's press were here watching behind me as he continued to plead his innocence. Now, if this case goes through, if the Attorney General is successful in her bid, then Donald Trump could be forced to pay $370 million and could lose his business licenses here in New York.
And Sally, when is the judge likely to rule?
I'm not quite sure what you said that, but we're expecting to hear the results of this case by the end of the month. That's what the judge has said. Now, we need to remember that everything is heating up here for the next presidential election. Donald Trump has put himself forward. He's the clear front runner in that bid to return to the White House later this year. And he's using this case, as well as many cases across the country taking place involving him. He's using that as a time to drum up support, say that this is all politically motivated, trying to keep him out of the White House.
Okay, thanks, Sally. That's Sally Patterson reporting from outside the courthouse in New York. Okay, let's get back to our panel. Jeff, let's talk about this case. The New York State Supreme Court judge has already ruled in pretrial proceedings that the defendants committed fraud on a broad scale. And as we heard, Trump says he's an innocent man and that the New York prosecutor is a fraud. The banks, according to Trump, got all their money back. What did you make of what he had to say and the case against him and his company?
Well, first of all, the finding was that he had committed fraud, and that was not an issue at all in the hearings that were held regarding the amount of damages. The damage, what Mr. Trump doesn't understand, apparently, is that there doesn't have to be any actual harm to anybody. The fact that they got paid back is not the issue. The interest rate that he paid is a loss to those banks. And one of the major problems that he has is Deutsche Bank was one of those banks, and Deutsche Bank doesn't have one of the greatest reputations in the world. They've been fined numerous times over in Europe by the German government, billions of euros. So the truth of the matter is that he doesn't understand that. He wanted to speak. He made it about 2.5 minutes, and then he violated the orders that he was given as to how he was to limit his speech. And the judge shut him down and said, we're going to lunch. I think that what we're looking at here is more probably than not less than the 371 that Ms. James is asking for, but it'll probably be north of 200 million. But it really doesn't affect him immediately because he'll ask for a stay so that he can hold on to his licenses. He will ask for a stay so he doesn't have to raise the money. That kind of cash is really not what Donald Trump's wealth is about. And so he would most probably have to part with a couple of pieces of property, more likely than not in Manhattan. And that's hard because his general business is really located in Manhattan. Yeah. And if he's forced not to do things in New York, he's got a real problem.
Adolfo, what are your thoughts? I mean, the former president has called this case, quote, election interference at the highest level, unquote. What do you make of the case?
Well, I would even go further than that. It is election interference. We know the motivations of both the judge in this case and, of course, the prosecutor who's been running and has been a political hack and made this the issue. Jeffrey's right about the harm, technically. But when has this statute ever been applied in New York? Never. So this is unprecedented in New York when there has been no harm, has been the case here. The banks, even after this was divulged, have not come back and made claims to say, well, you know, we were in essence defrauded because we could have gotten a higher percentage of loans in terms of interest rates because the properties we thought they were worth more than they actually were. It's also incumbent on the banks to do their own due diligence. So a lot of factors here. The fact is there is no harm. But putting aside that technicality, that is a key point. Secondly, the judge and his wife and his activism, his behavior, if this were a Trump judge behaving like this with Hunter Biden or someone else, the left would be screaming about this. All of these jurisdictions, all of these prosecutors, and all of these judges, with the exception of Judge Noriega, who did the right thing in Delaware with the Hunter Biden case, are all leftists, Democrats, partisans, in the worst shape, way, or form. So it's beyond election interference. It's political persecution, and it is the weaponization, and it goes back to our earlier discussion why President Trump is doing so well with the American people, not just his base supporters.
Yeah. Rafael, in recent days, the president has warned, I'll get to you in a moment, the president has warned of bedlam in the country. And in fact, he said, quote, big trouble if the courts rule against him. Now, there's already been a threat against the judge at his home. He lives in Long Island. I mean, how serious is this?
It's extremely serious. we don't really know, I hate to disagree with Adolfo, but we don't know the motivations of anyone.
Yeah.
They're impossible to know, and we don't know the motivations of former President Trump when he verbally, I won't say attacked, but was verbally disrespectful to the judge in his courtroom. And we don't know former President Trump's motivations when he says this sort of thing. That can be dangerous. I mean, proven all over the world. This is just a historical fact that that kind of language can lead to action. But we don't need to know the motivations. We know that that can lead to action, and that's a danger, and it's objectively it's an irresponsible use of a very large platform.
Jeff, as I said, there are multiple cases. Let's look at another case. On Tuesday, a 3-judge panel in a federal appeals court that was here in Washington, D.C., they heard arguments in a case in which President Trump claims he is immune from prosecution. Let's play a short excerpt from that. This is an exchange between Judge Florence Pan and the Trump attorney, John Saar. Let's listen.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which would require impeachment and conviction by the Senate.
So, Jeff, I've only got about a minute, but 64% of Americans think Trump should not enjoy any kind of immunity from prosecution. That's according to a poll. But what is at the heart of his assertion that he's immune?
The heart of his assertion is no different than what he said in 2016. I can go out on Fifth Avenue and I can shoot someone, and no one's going to do anything about it. That's just not accurate. And the cases that they're relying upon deal with actions that were taken by presidents in furtherance of their presidency. The allegations in the indictment here are that these actions took place outside of his role as president of the United States, but more as candidate Trump for the presidency. So that part of it kind of does fail. The real matter here is that it depends, what is going to happen, it depends upon what this group does. If they write an opinion denying it, and they track what the 11th Circuit did in the case involving Mark Meadows and his claim of derivative immunity, then this case will not be taken by the Supreme Court. It's over, and it'll be a trial in March.
Okay, that is where we have to leave it. We have run out of time. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.